My sister-in-law forcibly snatched my daughter's walking cane and deliberately snapped it in half. She screamed, "You crippled brat with no manners, clean this house right now." She treated my 9-year-old daughter like a servant, forcing her to clean the house and serve her aunt and grandmother who were freeloading in our home. When I found out what they had done, I took action immediately. 5 hours later, they were screaming hysterically. But before the story begins, please comment below where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can continue to grow and bring you even more powerful stories. That afternoon felt unbearably hot outside, but inside the large house, the air was cold, heavy with tension for a little girl named Sophie. The wall clock showed 2 p.m. This should have been a peaceful rest hour, but Sophie's throat was painfully dry. She had been holding back her thirst for 2 hours, too afraid to leave her room. Pain throbbed relentlessly in her injured left leg every time she moved. The doctor had warned that the bone had not fully healed and that she needed to be extremely careful. But the thirst became unbearable. Gathering all her courage, the 9-year-old slowly climbed down from her bed and reached for her walking cane leaning against the wall. It had been her lifeline for the past month. Breathing heavily as she fought through the pain, Sophie stepped into the hallway. Tap, tap. The sound of the cane echoed through the silent corridor. She tried to move quietly, but her fragile body struggled to stay balanced. Every step was a battle against pain and fear of the other people in the house. In the living room, the TV was playing loudly. On the plush sofa sat Vanessa, her aunt, her mother's sister-in-law, casually watching a celebrity gossip show while eating potato chips. Crumbs littered the carpet that had just been cleaned earlier that morning by the part-time housekeeper who had already left. Nearby sat Margaret, Sophie's grandmother. She was busy scrolling on her phone, occasionally chuckling at messages from her social group. They looked comfortable, content, as if this house were their personal kingdom and they were its queens. As Sophie approached the kitchen, she had no choice but to pass through the living room. The tapping sound of her cane caught Vanessa's attention. Vanessa turned sharply, her relaxed expression instantly sour. To her, Sophie's injury was nothing but an inconvenience. The sound of the cane was noise ruining her TV time. Without warning, Vanessa jumped up and rushed toward Sophie. Sophie froze. Her body trembled as her aunt approached with pure anger in her eyes. Before Sophie could speak or even ask permission to pass, Vanessa yanked the cane out of her hands. The sudden force made Sophie lose balance and crash onto the hard floor. A sharp, unbearable pain shot through her injured leg. Sophie whimpered, clutching her knee, fighting back tears. Vanessa didn't care. She held the cane with disgust as if it were trash. Then, using all her strength, she slammed it against her own knee. Crack! The aluminum cane snapped in two. Sophie stared in shock. That cane was the only thing allowing her to walk. Tears streamed down her face, not just from pain, but from terror. Vanessa tossed the broken pieces into the corner and sneered down at Sophie. Her shrill voice filled the room as she screamed Sophie was a disabled child with no manners, daring to disturb her comfort. She hurled insult after insult, mocking her condition. Margaret didn't move to help. Instead, she laughed. She commented that Sophie was spoiled, just like her mother. According to Margaret, sick children shouldn't be pampered. Her laughter pierced Sophie's heart. Then Vanessa walked to the kitchen and returned with a dirty mop and a bucket of murky water left over from earlier. She threw the wet, foul-smelling mop straight into Sophie's face. Water soaked her clothes and hair. Hands on her hips, Vanessa ordered Sophie to clean the living room floor, the crumbs Vanessa herself had dropped. She shouted that Sophie needed to learn to be useful, that in this house, Sophie existed to serve them. Sophie weakly protested that her leg hurt and she couldn't stand without her cane. That only enraged Vanessa further. She threatened to tell Daniel, Sophie's father, lies about her behavior when he came home from work. Vanessa knew he would always side with his mother and sister. Sophie knew he wouldn't believe her. Sobbing quietly, Sophie began to drag herself across the floor. She squeezed the mop with her trembling hands and scrubbed while sitting, unable to stand. Vanessa returned to the sofa, casually eating more chips. She even dropped extra crumbs on purpose, laughing as Sophie was forced to clean again. Margaret complained that watching Sophie crawl on the floor made her uncomfortable and demanded she hurry up. What they didn't know? A black sedan had been parked outside the gate for the past 10 minutes. Inside sat Claire, Sophie's mother. Her hands clenched tightly around her phone. Her eyes burned red with fury. The home security camera app streamed everything live, clear video and sound. Claire watched Vanessa break the cane. She heard Margaret laugh. She saw her daughter dragged and humiliated. Her chest tightened. She wanted to storm inside and destroy them, but Claire's mind was sharper than her rage. She recorded everything and saved it to a hidden folder. This evidence was her weapon. Claire adjusted her shawl, wiped her tears, and practiced a gentle smile in the mirror. Not kindness, a predator's smile. She stepped out of the car and entered the house cheerfully, greeting them as if nothing had happened. Vanessa and Margaret panicked. Vanessa quickly lied, claiming Sophie insisted on helping clean and spilled water herself. Margaret backed her up. Claire listened calmly. Then she smiled wider. She thanked them. She handed Vanessa an elegant envelope, exclusive vouchers for a luxury spa favored by elite societals. She insisted they go immediately. A premium ride was already waiting. Greed blinded them. They left without suspicion. Once the car disappeared down the road, Claire locked a door. She rushed to Sophie, broke down and held her tight. Then Claire made a call. Her voice was cold. Bring the largest moving truck you have. Empty the 2 guest rooms downstairs. Take everything. Leave nothing behind. Claire emphasized that she did not want to see a single trace of the former occupants of those rooms once the sun went down. After ending the call, Claire turned back to Sophie and gently wiped the tears from her daughter's cheeks. She told Sophie that they were going to play a game. Sophie didn't need to be afraid anymore, because today, this house would be cleaned. Not cleaned of dust, but cleaned of real filth. Sophie looked at her mother with confusion, but the strength in Claire's eyes made her feel safe. Claire then took a first aid kit and carefully treated the scrapes on Sophie's hands while waiting for the movers to arrive. In Claire's mind, every step of Vanessa and Margaret's downfall was already carefully planned. Those 5 hours at the salon would be the last pleasure they would ever enjoy before facing the bitter reality that their comfortable life in this house was over forever. Once Claire was certain the car carrying Vanessa and Margaret had completely disappeared from sight, she wasted no time moving to the next phase of her plan. Her top priority now was Sophie's physical and emotional condition. Claire gently helped Sophie into her own car, seating her carefully in the front passenger seat and fastening her seatbelt. Sophie was still sobbing softly, tear stains lingering on her flushed cheeks. Claire drove straight to the nearest 24-hour medical clinic equipped with X-ray facilities and an orthopedic specialist. Throughout the drive, Claire's left hand never let go of Sophie's small hand, offering warmth and reassurance that had been brutally stolen by her aunt and grandmother. Claire forced herself to stay calm. She had to be strong, because at that moment, she was the only shield protecting her daughter. At the clinic, the doctor examined Sophie's leg. His expression grew serious as he pressed around the swollen knee and ankle. Sophie winced in pain every time the bruised area was touched. Claire's heart shattered at the sight. The doctor explained that there was significant new swelling caused by a hard impact or fall, which had worsened the healing of Sophie's previously fractured bone. He advised complete rest and minimal movement for several days. Claire's jaw tightened. She asked the doctor to prepare a full medical injury report, along with photographic documentation of the bruises and swelling. Claire briefly explained that the documents were needed for legal purposes. Her child had just been physically abused. The doctor nodded firmly and immediately processed the request. These medical records would become one of Claire's sharpest weapons. After the treatment was complete and Sophie's leg was rewrapped with a more comfortable elastic bandage, they returned home. Sophie, now medicated for pain, grew drowsy and soon fell asleep in Claire's bedroom. Claire tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and quietly closed the door. Now it was time for the second act. That afternoon, the house felt completely different. Claire's hired crew worked swiftly and efficiently. The 2 guest rooms on the ground floor, previously occupied by Vanessa and Margaret, were now completely empty. No more piles of Vanessa's dirty laundry, no more Margaret's cosmetics cluttering the vanity. Everything was gone, as if they never existed. The clock showed 5 p.m. Claire sat on the living room sofa, the exact spot where Vanessa had been sitting earlier. She turned on the large flat-screen TV, connected it to her phone, and prepared the edited CCTV footage. She waited. This was the decisive moment. Claire knew Daniel was a good man, but his greatest weakness was his inability to stand up to his mother. He had always asked Claire to give in for the sake of family peace. Tonight, she would show him that peace had been an illusion, paid for with their child's suffering. The sound of a car entering the driveway broke the silence. Daniel had come home. He entered the house with a tired face after a long day of work. The first thing he noticed was the unnatural quiet. Normally, the TV would be blaring, or Vanessa's shrill voice would echo through the house. But now, nothing. Daniel saw Claire sitting alone on the sofa, staring blankly at the dark TV screen. He asked Claire gently why the house was so quiet and where his mother and sister were. Claire didn't answer immediately. She slowly turned to him. Her cold gaze pierced straight through him. Without raising her voice, without tears or insults, Claire asked Daniel to sit beside her. A sense of dread washed over him. Claire pressed play. The television lit up. Daniel watched in horror as Vanessa violently ripped Sophie's walking cane away and snapped it over her knee. The sound of the break echoed in the silent room, making Daniel's heart stop. Then he heard Vanessa scream the word disabled. His hands began to tremble. But the worst was yet to come. He watched his own mother, Margaret, laughing hysterically as her granddaughter fell to the floor. Her laughter sounded monstrous. He saw Sophie drenched with a dirty mop and forced to crawl while cleaning the floor. Tears streamed down Daniel's face. Everything he had believed collapsed. Claire turned off the TV. Silence returned, broken only by Daniel's sobs. Claire placed a thick folder on Daniel's lap. Inside were not divorce papers, but bills. Maxed out credit cards under Claire's name, debt notices from online lenders, receipts for luxury purchases, branded bags, jewelry, expensive clothing, high-end skincare, all purchased by Vanessa and Margaret using Claire's personal data. Claire finally spoke. She explained that she had stayed silent for years out of respect for Daniel. She had quietly paid off their debts, amounting to hundreds of thousands of dollars, using her own savings to protect his pride. But today changed everything. Legally, Vanessa and Margaret now owed her. She would no longer be anyone's cash cow. Claire gave Daniel a choice: be a husband and father who protects his wife and daughter, or remain a blind mama boy and let his family destroy their house. Daniel lowered his head. At the back of the folder, he saw the medical report. Photos of Sophie's swollen, bruised legs shattered him completely. He had failed. He looked up at Claire with tear-filled eyes and said he chose his wife and daughter. He would not stop her, no matter what she decided. Claire nodded. She now had full permission. The execution stage was ready. 5 hours of indulgence at a luxury salon would be paid for with a lifetime of suffering. Claire adjusted her shawl, took a deep breath, and prepared herself for the final performance of the night. The sky slowly shifted into shades of crimson and orange as the sun descended toward the western horizon. Inside a comfortable, air-conditioned ride-hailing car, Vanessa and Margaret sat with ever-widening smiles on their faces. They had just spent 5 full hours immersed in luxury at a premium Muslima salon. Their skin glowed after expensive facial treatments, their bodies felt light and relaxed after professional massages, and the elegant scent of floral perfume lingered on their clothes. Throughout the ride home, they could not stop talking about how wonderful life felt when someone else paid for everything. Vanessa giggled softly while admiring herself in a compact mirror, praising her own beauty and mocking Claire for being foolish enough to finance their indulgence. Meanwhile, Claire herself was working tirelessly to earn every dollar. Margaret chimed in arrogantly, saying it was only natural for Claire to be devoted because she was lucky to have married Daniel, her handsome son. They felt like queens descending from their thrones, ready to return to their palace to rule over servants. The car finally turned into a quiet residential neighborhood. As the vehicle slowed near their house, Vanessa frowned in confusion. She noticed something strange piled up in front of the gate, an unusually high stack of items partially covered with a plastic tarp with several objects sticking out. She muttered to her mother, wondering if the neighbors were moving and had left their belongings carelessly in front of the house. Margaret, whose eyesight was no longer sharp, merely squinted and brushed it off as long as the pile did not block their entrance. The car stopped right in front of the gate. Vanessa paid the driver with pocket money she had asked Daniel for earlier that morning. Then the two of them stepped out with exaggerated elegance, as if paparazzi cameras were snapping photos. That elegance vanished instantly when Vanessa tried to open the small gate they usually used. The key would not turn. She tried again, shaking it roughly, assuming it was jammed, but the padlock did not budge. Her irritation grew. Upon closer inspection, she realized this was not their old lock. It was brand new, large, shiny, and extremely sturdy, secured with a thick iron chain wrapped tightly around the bars. Vanessa's face flushed with anger. She was convinced Claire had deliberately changed the lock to make things difficult. She began screaming Claire's name at the top of her lungs, pounding her palms against the metal gate, shattering the evening silence. Margaret joined in, shouting for Sophie to come out and open the gate for her grandmother. No response. The house looked eerily quiet. The porch light was still off, and the curtains were tightly drawn. Neighbors began stepping outside to watch the commotion. Vanessa noticed Mrs. Yates standing across the street, her gaze cold, nothing like her usual friendly demeanor. Oblivious, Vanessa snapped at Mrs. Yates, demanding to know whether she had seen Claire leave the house. Mrs. Yates said nothing, only turned her head away with a look of disgust Vanessa failed to notice. Vanessa's fury peaked. She kicked the gate again, cursing Claire as an ungrateful sister-in-law. At that exact moment, the porch light switched on automatically. The front door slowly opened, and Claire appeared. She stepped out calmly, dressed in clean, neat house clothes. In her hand was a cup of hot tea, steam rising gently from it. Claire stood on the porch, staring straight at the gate where her mother-in-law and sister-in-law were raging like lunatics. There was no warm smile like earlier that day. Her face was flat, cold, radiating an authority Vanessa had never seen before. Vanessa immediately exploded with rage, screaming for Claire to open the gate because her feet hurt from standing too long. She hurled insults about the new lock. Claire said nothing. She simply sipped her tea slowly, savoring the calming jasmine aroma as if the chaos before her gate were merely evening entertainment. After placing the cup on the porch table, Claire reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small remote control. Vanessa sneered, assuming Claire had finally given in and would open the automatic gate so they could enter. Claire pressed the button. The motor hummed softly, and the heavy iron gate slid open. Vanessa and Margaret lifted their chins, ready to unleash 1,000 complaints. Then they froze. What awaited them was not a clear path, nor Claire's welcome. From the shadows near the side garage emerged 2 tall men in full police uniforms. They walked firmly toward the open gate. Behind them stood Claire, motionless like a statue. Vanessa's heart nearly stopped. Margaret's face turned ghost white. They instinctively stepped back, stunned and terrified to see law enforcement coming from what was supposed to be their refuge. The situation flipped completely in seconds. Claire had not opened the gate to let them in. She opened it to hand them over to the law. One officer held a thick case file. Vanessa, trembling, tried to ask what was happening, her eyes desperately searching for Daniel, hoping he would appear and fix everything. Then her gaze shifted to the pile of items by the roadside. A strong gust of wind lifted the plastic tarp. Vanessa's eyes widened in horror. Those were her designer handbags, bought with Claire's credit cards, Margaret's luxury dresses, Vanessa's beloved high heels, all dumped carelessly on dusty ground like worthless trash. Expensive perfume bottles rolled into the dry gutter. Vanessa screamed hysterically. Ignoring the officers, she tried to rush forward to save her favorite bag. She didn't get far. Sophie suddenly appeared from behind Claire. The little girl stood firmly holding a brand new titanium support cane, strong, shiny, far superior to the old one Vanessa had once broken. Vanessa didn't see it in time. She tripped. Her body lurched forward and slammed hard onto the asphalt, landing at the feet of the police officers. Her knee struck a stone and she screamed in pain. Instant karma unfolded before everyone's eyes. The leg she had used to kick and humiliate others now knelt helplessly on the ground. Claire watched without shock, only quiet certainty. An officer swiftly pulled out his handcuffs. Click. Vanessa was arrested for child abuse, fraud, and identity theft involving illegal loans. As Vanessa was dragged away screaming, Margaret was left standing alone, surrounded by luxury items, under the judgmental stares of the neighbors. Silence fell. Later, Margaret begged Daniel to take her in. Daniel emerged with an old suitcase. He placed it at her feet. Inside were her remaining clothes and a small amount of cash, just enough for a bus ticket and 1 week of living expenses. "Go home," Daniel said. Home to the village she abandoned. When Margaret accused him of being an ungrateful son, Daniel asked quietly, "Where was your heart when Sophie was suffering?" Margaret had no answer. Daniel stated calmly that the house belonged entirely to Claire. It was her inheritance. "If I defend you," he said, "I deserve to be thrown out too." And this time, he would accept it. With full awareness, Daniel chose to remain with his wife and daughter, whom he had emotionally abandoned for years out of fear and blind obedience to his mother's ego. He took a step back, distancing himself from Margaret. He admitted that he had failed as a father because he had been too afraid of his own mother, and now it was time to atone. He would no longer allow parasites, even if they were his own mother and sister, to destroy the peace of his family ever again. Daniel issued a final warning, telling Margaret to leave immediately before Claire changed her mind and reported her to the police to follow Vanessa. At the mention of the police, Margaret's face drained of color. She knew Claire was not bluffing. Without waiting for a response, Daniel turned around and walked back into the house. His back looked fragile, yet relieved. He closed the front door firmly. The sound of the lock turning, double and tight, echoed through the evening. That sound marked the definitive end of a toxic bond that had shackled Daniel for decades. Outside, Margaret stood alone. The evening wind blew harder. She stared blankly at the closed door, her dignity completely shattered. There was no shelter left for her. With trembling hands, she grabbed the handle of the old suitcase. Suppressing quiet sobs, Margaret dragged her feet out of the luxurious yard, walking toward the main road to look for public transportation, leaving behind the remnants of the false luxury she had briefly tasted. The fluorescent lights in the police interrogation room were blinding and cold. The walls were bare and colorless, creating an oppressive atmosphere that crushed anyone inside. Vanessa sat on a hard metal chair, her hands still cuffed to the table. The face that had glowed earlier after expensive treatments now looked dull and disheveled. Her makeup was smeared by tears and cold sweat. Yet even cornered, her arrogance had not fully disappeared. She lifted her chin defiantly, insisting this was nothing more than an exaggerated family misunderstanding. Vanessa repeatedly demanded her right to make a phone call. She proudly mentioned her boyfriend, a wealthy young businessman, utterly convinced that once he found out she was here, he would arrive with top lawyers and have her released instantly. In her mind, Claire was just an ordinary woman with no connections, while her boyfriend was powerful and influential. Vanessa even threatened the officers, claiming they would lose their jobs if they dared to detain her any longer. The investigator responded with nothing more than a thin, dismissive smile. He then placed a tablet directly in front of Vanessa. The screen lit up. Vanessa's eyes widened in terror. It was a video of herself breaking Sophie's walking cane and throwing a dirty mop at the child. But what made her blood run cold was not the content. It was where the video was being shown. The video was playing on a large local community social media account with hundreds of thousands of followers. The view count was climbing at a terrifying speed, already in the millions within hours. The investigator scrolled down to the comments. Thousands of hateful messages flooded the screen. Netizens viciously condemned Vanessa. Some exposed her identity. Others wished her a long, rotting sentence in prison. Even neighbors from her former neighborhood commented, confirming that Vanessa and her mother were indeed cruel parasites. The elegant socialite image Vanessa had carefully curated for years collapsed in seconds. She was no longer beautiful Vanessa. She was now Vanessa the child abuser. At the height of her panic, the interrogation room door opened. A man walked in with confident steps. Vanessa's face lit up instantly. It was her boyfriend. He wore a sharp suit, looking authoritative and composed. Vanessa burst into pitiful tears, claiming she had been framed and mistreated, begging him to take her home. She expected comfort. She received disgust. The man stopped 2 meters away, staring at her with undisguised contempt. He spoke directly to Vanessa, his voice icy. He said he hadn't come to save her. He came because he had seen the video. He was deeply ashamed to be associated with a woman who could abuse a disabled child. For him, business reputation and family honor were everything, and being linked to a viral criminal like Vanessa was unforgivable. He pulled a small box from his pocket and tossed it on the table. It opened, empty. He demanded the return of the engagement ring he had given her the month before, a diamond ring worth tens of thousands of dollars. He also demanded back every luxury bag and watch he had ever gifted her. He had learned about her online loan debts and suspected the items had already been sold or pawned. Vanessa's face turned paper white. She had indeed pawned the ring a week ago to fund a friend's birthday party for the sake of appearances. Seeing her silence, the man scoffed. He had expected it. Without hesitation, he ended the relationship on the spot and warned that he would report her for embezzlement if the ring was not returned within 24 hours. He turned and walked out without looking back, ignoring Vanessa's hysterical screams. The door slammed shut. Her final hope was gone. Vanessa was alone. No brother, no mother, no wealthy savior. Only the investigator, calmly ready to continue the legal process that would send her behind bars for a very long time. Months passed. Vanessa's legal process proceeded smoothly. The evidence Claire provided was overwhelming: clear CCTV footage, undeniable medical reports, and detailed records of illegal financial transactions. In the cold courtroom, the judge's jallet struck decisively. Freedom ended. Vanessa was sentenced to several years in prison on multiple charges, including child abuse and financial fraud. No powerful lawyer stood behind her. No wealthy lover paid her way out. No family mourned her downfall. She was led away in handcuffs, head bowed in unbearable shame. Margaret's fate was no better. After being expelled with nothing but an old suitcase and a small amount of cash, she attempted to return to her hometown, believing relatives would welcome her. She was wrong. The video of her cruelty had already spread through messaging groups, even to the village. By the time her bus arrived, everyone knew. Doors closed in her face. Family members refused to shelter a woman known for abusing her own grandchild. That night, Margaret slept at a roadside guard post, bitten by mosquitoes, shivering in the cold. Eventually, she returned to the city and lived in a filthy rented room on the outskirts, surviving on leftovers and pity. One bright afternoon, desperate and starving, Margaret went to Sophie's school. She hid near the gate. A black sedan arrived. Claire stepped out, elegant, composed, powerful. Then Sophie appeared. Margaret froze. She was no longer using a cane. She walked and even ran toward her mother, fully healed. Tears fell from Margaret's eyes. She stepped forward. Claire noticed her. Her expression was calm and cold. Margaret reached out. Claire stepped between them. A silent command: "Do not touch my child." Sophie spoke calmly. "Grandma said I had to clean floors to be useful. Now I'm healed. Grandma should clean her heart first. Mom's money is only for good people." Claire smiled with pride. They got into the car. The tinted window rose. Margaret was left behind. 1 year later, warmth filled the dining room. The house was peaceful. Claire set the dinner table. Sophie played nearby, healthy, happy. Daniel entered with a pot of steaming soup. He looked thinner but stronger, calmer. He had kept his promise. His loyalty was finally where it belonged. Everything had been legally transferred into Sophie's name as a guarantee for her future. At home, Daniel no longer sat back like a king after coming home from work. With full awareness, he took on household responsibilities, helping with chores, caring for his child, and serving his wife as an act of repentance for his past failures as a protector of his family. Dinner passed peacefully, filled with light conversation about Sophie's school life and their plans for the year-end holidays. Sophie spoke enthusiastically about her friends. Daniel listened attentively, occasionally placing pieces of chicken onto Sophie's plate. Claire watched the interaction between her husband and daughter with quiet relief. She did not hate Daniel, but she would never forget. Broken trust takes a lifetime to rebuild, and Daniel was trying, day by day, to piece it back together. At the very least, the parasites that once poisoned his mind were gone, allowing Daniel to become a man capable of reason again. While warmth enveloped Claire's home, a starkly opposite reality existed elsewhere, behind towering concrete walls topped with barbed wire. Inside one of the women's prison blocks, Vanessa was squatting on the slick, foul-smelling floor of a communal bathroom. She wore a dull, oversized inmate uniform that hung loosely on her now emaciated body. Her task that day was scrubbing toilet floors, routine work for a new inmate at the very bottom of the prison hierarchy. There were no spa treatments anymore, no expensive skincare creams. Vanessa's skin had grown rough, her hands calloused, her face aged far beyond her years. As she tried to stand while carrying a bucket of water, her foot slipped on the mossy floor. Her body slammed down hard. Her right shin struck the sharp concrete edge of the bathtub. Then came a sickening crack echoed through the bathroom. Then came Vanessa's scream of agony reverberating down the corridor. Karma worked with poetic precision. Once she had broken Sophie's support cane and caused the child's leg to swell. Now it was her own leg that broke on the filthiest floor imaginable. There would be no gentle orthopedic specialist here. In prison, she would receive only minimal clinical care. The prison doctor would later declare that the bone could not heal properly due to limited facilities, leaving Vanessa permanently crippled. She would need a walking cane, the very object she once despised and destroyed. Elsewhere, beneath a dimly lit city overpass, an elderly woman with tangled, white-streaked hair rummaged through piles of plastic trash. It was Margaret. A year of living on the streets had eroded the last remnants of her sanity. She carried a filthy burlap sack on her back filled with empty bottles she would sell for a few dollars, just enough for food. Her clothes were torn and ragged, her body reeking from rarely bathing. As Margaret bent down to pick up a discarded water bottle near the roadside, a luxury sedan passed by at moderate speed. The car looked eerily similar to Claire's. Margaret's failing eyes lit up. She believed it was Claire coming to pick her up. Hallucinations often visited her when hunger grew unbearable. She jogged toward the edge of the road, waving her dirt-blackened hands, shouting the names Daniel and Sophie, smiling widely in hope. The car did not slow. Instead, its tires tore through a puddle of muddy rainwater left from the night before. A violent splash of filthy water hit Margaret squarely in the face and body. She coughed violently, wiping mud from her burning eyes. Margaret stood there frozen at the roadside, soaked, filthy, humiliated. The car drove on, disappearing into the glittering city lights that had never been kind to her. Only then did Margaret realize it was not Claire's car. And even if it had been, the outcome would have been the same. She had thrown away diamonds to collect gravel, and now she was buried beneath that worthless gravel for the rest of her life. She bent down again, picking up the fallen bottle, muttering to herself, blaming fate, never once blaming her own actions. Back in the warm house, Claire stood before the large mirror in her bedroom after putting Sophie to bed. She adjusted her shawl, studying her reflection. There was a firmness in her face that hadn't been there before. She was no longer the naive Claire who believed kindness would always be repaid with kindness. She had learned that sometimes, to be a good mother, she had to become a monster to those who threatened her child. Claire walked to the window, gazing at the clear night sky scattered with stars. Slowly, she drew the curtains closed, sealing away a dark past. She whispered a promise to herself, one she would carry forever. Never wake a lioness guarding her child, because she would not merely roar, she would tear apart anyone who dared to come close. Claire turned off the bedroom light, leaving the darkness outside for those who deserved it, while she and her family rested in the light of happiness they had fought for themselves. The screen of life closed this story with perfect justice.